Alrighty, House of the Dead Remake. The newest game to be released in this video and hopefully the last. It was developed by Forever Entertainment, the same team as the Panzer Dragoon remake, which probably explains the whole sequel remake delays, and should make me a bit skeptical since the reception to that one wasn't particularly great by fans. This does beg the question as to why they're remaking House of the Dead 1 specifically. I do understand that the original game was from 1996 and hasn't seen a home port since the Sega Saturn. I could understand why Sega would want to remake this particular game, seeing as it would be for a modern audience, who most likely has never played a House of the Dead game. The issue I have with this decision is that there was a new House of the Dead game released in 2018 called Scarlet Dawn, which would have been a more logical game to port instead. My guess is that it's more marketable to remake the old title since there's a lot more nostalgic value toward it, which I can't really argue with. That being said, I did get an opportunity to play the original House of the Dead arcade cabinet during the production of this video, so I guess this works out perfectly in hindsight. So how does this remake stack up then? Well, the main menu starts by giving you the worst possible first impression, with a loud music cue that kicks in over a laggy gameplay video with a stock blood overlay. Not sure why they thought this would improve the presentation, but I suppose it did shock me with just how sudden the music kicks in, so I'll count that as a scare. This has some pretty strong licensed game energy, which I sort of find charming, but to be completely honest, I do find this menu to be pretty annoying more than anything. Speaking of annoying, this game has some pretty bad load times. I know this is a Switch game, but I think 30 to 40 second loads for a rail shooter is questionable at best. It isn't Taxi Chaos bad or anything, and there is some saving grace in the hint text. I particularly like this zombie text emoji. It adds a lot of charm to the experience. Alright, before we start the actual game, this genre requires 2 players. Like, sure, you could sit down and play this solo, but in order to get the most enjoyment possible out of a game like this, you need a second player. So I had my boyfriend tag along to play this with me, and we ran into a second issue with the game. Player 2 cannot join if you've already started a level. You have to toggle multiplayer mode on the main menu first. Ignoring the fact that the option itself is very out of the way, seriously, I had actual trouble finding it. But this is a literal arcade game. They thrive on allowing players to join in any time they want since they can make the multiplayer experience as convenient as possible. You know, in order to encourage more spending, having to awkwardly pause and quit just to wait for the long loads just to enable a multiplayer mode comes across as extremely badly designed. Anyway, the opening cutscene shows us the presentation, and it's something. The goal of the game is to control 1 to 2 emotionless protagonists as they mansion. Along the way they meet many characters, like this dying guy for example.
Others inside. Save them.
The cutscenes in this game are best described as inhuman. Everything feels off about the way that everyone speaks and looks. I'm convinced that everybody has already been zombified before we've even entered the mansion. The janky movement, the lack of facial animations, the character models. You can see their brain rot occurring in real time. I think it's best if we just start putting them out of their misery.
What happened?
Alright, I can't ignore it any longer. This game's budget is blatantly apparent. They are remaking a 3D game from the 90s, so the source material isn't going to be the easiest to update when compared to something that has stronger artistic direction like Space Channel 5. But I cannot look past the presentation. Every animation is the stiffest I've ever seen. The dialogue is ridiculous and delivered in the most unconvincing manner possible.
It's you!
There's absolutely no way I could take this experience seriously at all, and I really enjoy playing this game. It's great. They definitely stay true to the source material in this way, and honestly, I actually appreciate how cheesy this game is. Sure, they could have made the game super serious and dark, but would anyone take it seriously? I doubt it. Having every character move stiff as hell towards you to exchange laughable dialogue only adds charm to the experience. The voice acting is equally as memorable as the original games too. In fact, I would argue they made it even more cheesy. They took House of the Dead's over-the-top nature and cranked it to 10. I spent most of my playthrough just laughing along at how serious the tone of the plot is when combined with the cartoon-esque gameplay. I could sit here and tell you this game is trash or something, but honestly I had a lot of fun with this game. I do believe that the cheesy presentation and voice acting are things that are mostly done on purpose in spirit of the originals. So if that is the case, and I think the dev team did an amazing job utilizing the resources they had to lean into the low budget as a strength. Alright, I've taken the presentation part of my generic YouTube structure cheat sheet, so let's move on to the gameplay, which is where this being the Switch version ends up being beneficial, since this game has gyro aiming support in order to emulate using a Wii pointer to aim or something similar. The entire structure of the game is to have quick reflexes and reaction time in order to eliminate the zombie hordes without taking damage. This also ties into an optional objective to save the civilians trapped in the mansion, which is told to the player in the very intro of the game. Trying to do do this with horrible joystick controls is way more cumbersome than it's worth, so just use the gyro aiming, or the PlayStation Move I guess. The zombies themselves are plentiful in number. You can't go more than a few seconds without them walking around corners or ambushing you, which helps keep the game exciting. And the game takes immediate advantage of this by testing your trigger discipline, since they love to throw civilians on screen, either directly in the middle of a zombie horde or with a camera pan to a new room, just so you can accidentally feel like a horrible person. Seriously, I felt so bad every time I did this. This high octane gameplay also puts the absolutely amazing ragdoll physics on prominent display. The image of Jim Carrey from The Mask being absolutely blasted into ragdoll form is something that I think will stick with me my entire life. These put the final nail in the undead coffin for this game being taken seriously. This proves that the developers had to be self-aware about the goofiness in this game. You could add cartoon sound effects to this and it would be hilarious. But this does begin to show some of the inconsistencies with this approach, since despite the amount of comedic elements present in the game, it is still an M-rated horror game. There is still blood, and zombies will be dismembered in pretty gnarly ways. It sends a bit of a mixed tone. I guess I could just change the color of the blood in order to match the lighthearted tone. Oh wait, that's only in the PC version. Thank you, developers. Although Doom Eternal allows you to collect cute toy versions of the demons, so I think I'm just looking too deep into this. In reality, the only part of the game that bothered me enough to mention is the final boss of the game, Magician. Sorry, I had to see that again. The boss flies around quickly and frequently spawns projectiles you have to shoot. Now that's annoying enough on its own, but it's not the issue I have with the boss. The problem I have is that the boss has an inhumanely long health bar. Like, a health bar is so long that even while playing this 2-player, my hands started to cramp up multiple times. It is literally painful to beat this boss. Another thing I should probably bring up is the game's length, being around 40 minutes for a story mode, which might immediately sound bad. Wow, Sega can only afford to remake one 40-minute arcade game, they must suck. But this isn't as much of an issue as it would be in a game like Panzer Dragoon, since this game thrives off of being a fun multiplayer game, so you would be much more likely to replay it. The game also incentivizes you to return with optional branching paths alongside the previously mentioned civilian rescue mechanic. Although once again, they did release Scarlet Dawn in 2018, which has a runtime that's roughly an hour, which makes the choice to remake this one a bit more odd. Honestly, I like the House of Dead remake. Despite some flaws, I still think it's a fun game that you can pick up and have an enjoyable time with. Although I would not recommend the Switch version if you have the choice. As nice as the gyro support is, this game suffers from pretty much every Switch performance issue you could think of. The frame rate is a bit spotty, and although it is perfectly playable, it is very distracting. Not to mention that the game also has a horde mode that makes the zombie count even higher, so the performance just takes a massive dip. And just a reminder that all of the footage in this video is with the performance mode, so I really don't know how any of this would run in the normal mode. Personally, I would either recommend the PS4 version if you have the PlayStation Move, or the PC version since it has the most amount of customization and likely runs the best. Either way, as a whole, this remake is a mixed bag depending on what you're really looking for in a House of the Dead game. Do you want the campy, over-the-top cheese of ancient rail shooters and can excuse a lot of the shortcomings in the presentation? Or do you want a more fleshed out horror take on the franchise? Personally, it's a House of the Dead game. You're going in for the over-the-top experience, and I think this game delivers that in spades. I really enjoyed this entry and can recommend it if rail shooters of old are something that's on your radar.
Alright, it's time to check out how you did today. Now let's take a look. Class B license. Decided to play it safe, huh? Come back next time and show us your best. Game over.